Good morning. Morning. In the late 70s and early 80s, there was a style of climbing that evolved. We called Alpine style, which is what you did when you went to the Alps. And we started to apply it to much bigger mountains. And it was in its infancy then. Alpine style means you have no expedition, you have no support, you have no fixed ropes, you have no camps, you and your buddy. You start up a climb and you go for it. So you take a risk with death in that style of climbing. We made two first ascents in Alaska, Jack Roberts and I. This one, north face of Mount Huntington. It's possibly the most dangerous climb in Alaska. It's never been repeated, even 40 years later. We went back for more to roll the dice one more time in 1980 and climbed the south-west face of Denali. This is actually the biggest mountain in the world. It's not the tallest, but it is the biggest. If you measure from the base of the glacier to the summit, it's 2,000 feet bigger than Everest on the southwest face. So very committing. But the story doesn't start there. Back in 1977, I was the sorcerer's apprentice. You can probably guess which one's the sorcerer and which one's the apprentice. Here I am, impatiently waiting for the sun to set so we can start climbing in the night. Dave Wilkinson and I had the most fantastic season in 1977. He really showed me what was possible. It was a game changer for me, and we had a fantastic summer. This is one of the best ice climbs in the Chamonix Valley, and as the summer drew to a close, we made a second ascent on the Italian side of Mont Blanc and rescued 6 people, saving them from death. Clearly they would have been gone if they'd stayed where they were near the summit. They were lost in a storm, and we managed to bring them down. The problem with storms is the snow line creeps down into the valley and all the climbs are out of condition, and there's not much to do but go to the pub, which I quite like. And, this is the most famous pub in the world in 1970, the Bar National. It's still there today. It's a raclette cheese restaurant, unfortunately, but it used to be the climbers' home from home, and I could never go there without meeting, 20 people that I knew, part of the tribe, and some Americans turned up, which is unusual in Chamonix. You get lots of Brits and things like that, but Yanks are unusual. And one of them was the guy climbing that rock, Jack Roberts, and we got on like a house on fire. We decided that we weren't going to go back to the Alps the next summer. We were going to go to Alaska. We were going to make first ascents, second ascents. We didn't really have a plan, but the mountain chose itself. This is the cover of a magazine that used to be very popular back then called Mountain, and they published this picture saying the unclimbed north face of Mount Huntington, too dangerous ever to be climbed. And we thought, okay, we'll see about that. And here we are. Jack is the Chuck Norris impersonator, and I'm trying to be the Jim Morrison impersonator here as a young man on my way to Alaska. It's actually Anchorage. And you drive from Anchorage for 2.5 hours, and then suddenly you don't see any mountains at all. And then suddenly you get to the top of a little rise before you get to the village of Tarkina, which is just about 100 feet higher than the trees, and you get the view, this amazing view. It's not like the Himalayas, but Tarkina has an altitude of 60 feet, and McCartney, or Denali as we call it, has an altitude of 20,360 feet, so it's just like right off the deck. It's much, much bigger than Everest if you think of it that way. This town hasn't changed. I went back in 2012 on a memory lane trip. It still has 100 dogs and 50 people and a pub and a roadhouse, and that's about it. And you get around in Alaska in airplanes. You don't hike in, there's no porters. Your porter is a Cessna 185 Skywagon, which is a great way to go. I thought that maybe we could walk out. This is the tundra just outside Tarkina on the way in, and I was saying to Jack, maybe we could walk out after we finish that climb. That'd be a really cool thing to do. He said, no, man, you don't do that. It's not that far, it's only 60 miles. You don't want to do that. I said, mosquitoes or what? He said, no, you don't want to do that. This is the reason why you don't want to do that. He looks pretty cute, but that's the way you usually see them. Grizzly bear in Alaska will weigh between 350 and 400 kilos. And they're mean and ornery creatures. I'm scared to death of them. But this is how your journey starts. You've got your equipment, your food, your rucksack, your climbing gear in the back, and the glaciers slowly turn from dry, crevassed glaciers into snow-covered ones. And this is the west fork of the Ruth Glacier, and our objective is this first ascent. We knew nothing about it, we didn't read any books, we were the stupidest climbers in the world. We could have flown around it if we'd thought about it, but we didn't. So we arrived, God, what have we got ourselves into now? And then before you know it, the plane's gone and you're completely alone. There's the plane there. So that the sudden isolation is quite something. It's spaced itself. We had some scotch and we drank some of it. And we looked up at this. Now there's a few things you need to understand. These are called seracs. And yes, they fall down all the time. They look that way, don't they? And this is considered to be, most people would consider this a no-go area anywhere on this climb. It's threatened by this serac here. There's almost no possibility of not being threatened, and all these things fall down as well. So the reason it hadn't been climbed was fairly obvious. And this is the morning after our first night. The mountain welcomed us with a warning shot. The glass clouds would go from one side of the valley to the other. But I was only 22 years old and I was very determined, and we decided to climb it anyway. The weather was appalling. You could just see the tip of our tent sticking out there. That's probably just 2 days of snow, and it became impossible to camp. So we went underground, and this is the Hotel California, as we call it. That's Jack's bedroom, that's my bedroom. This is the entertainment area where I'm standing. Jack had even carved a TV set into one wall so he could stare blankly at it. One day it stopped snowing, and what you do is you dry out all your clothes. It's very important to keep everything as dry as you can. You must have dry equipment. And here's Jack drying his equipment. Some other climbers had arrived by then, and one of them took this picture of Jack and I on the second, starting our climb. There was a rock band at the bottom that was quite difficult, and it took us most of a day to overcome that. But we did, and we managed to get onto the hanging glacier that we knew that would be easier. And then it started to snow, and what we discovered was that when it snows on Mount Huntington, the angle is just enough to collect some of it, but not hold it for very long. It starts to avalanche almost at once, and I thought we would be swept from the face, but torrents of snow flowing around my boots, my ice axes, and occasional snow slides ploughing into Jack. It was below me. That's where we were. I found a crevasse just when I thought that everything was up. We were going to get avalanched off the mountain completely. I managed to find a crevasse and crawled into it. You can see the relief on Jack's face because he didn't know where I'd gone. But we were safe in there in a perverse sort of way. I tried to make light of it. I said to him, "Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore." He liked the Wizard of Oz. Next day got worse. We knew we couldn't get down. This is one of the cute things about Alpine climbing. There's no reverse. The only way up it is off it is up it, really. And the next day, while we were climbing, it started to snow again, and Jack actually got knocked unconscious by a snowslide. It was like big enough. We had to dig a hole. There was this little sketch from my journal about how we found a rock and managed to burrow into the snow underneath it to spend the night while it stopped snowing. The next day we really went for it. We knew we had to get out of there quickly. We only had 4 days food. We'd spent 2 days and it was a long way to go. But it was harder than we thought. We thought we'd be on the summit that day. We would have been in the Alps perhaps, but no. We had to spend another night in the open. Firstly, this is actually quite comfortable. You're in your sleeping bag and you've got a Gore-Tex bag to protect you. And there we are. There was a turn of events the next day. We thought this thing must ease off and it should be getting easy, but we kept coming across things like this where we'd have to climb very, very steep ice. One more night, just below the summit, you can see the rooster cone behind. We knew from the height of that we were about 1,000 feet from the summit of Mount Huntington. And the next day we made it, and that's me standing on the top. This is where the stupidity starts. We had intended to climb down this ridge here, which is idiotic when you look at it. It has overhanging snow mushrooms on it. There's nothing you can do with those. You can't fix any anchors in them. They collapse if you walk around on them. We discovered that we couldn't get down. Just to prove a point, I actually fell through a crevasse back onto the north face, going too close to the edge and the whole thing cracked off. I didn't take this picture. This is a picture taken by a friend of mine a year later who did the same thing, and you can see the avalanche crashing into the glacier where our camp was. So we had to go down the west face. We knew nothing about that. We knew there was a climb there, and we were very lucky. We managed to pick up the old pitons and the anchors that had been laid by other climbers in years before. was just as well because we lost our ropes. We abseiled over a big roof and the ropes jammed and we couldn't pull them down. So we were now in the middle of a face we didn't know much about, with only 80 foot of rope left as opposed to 300 feet. And we had to climb down that face. It took us 54 hours to get down. 4 days food. This is now day 9. And that's the circumnavigation that we made. All the way up the north face, down the west face, but we're on the wrong glacier now. Now we have to climb back over that ridge to get back to where we started. We were very lucky to get away with that, but I felt emboldened by it. You know, climbing with Jack was such a buzz. It was the first time I'd ever had a partner that was just as good as I was, not less, not more, but just the same. And together we felt we could do anything. Confused on the way home, didn't know how to feel about it. It took me a while to get over it, and I realised I was proud of it. You know, I really did think that we'd set the world on fire with that climb. Here we are back home. That's all that's left of our expedition. Before we left Huntington, we went and said hello to all the friendly folks in the ranger station, and this picture is hanging on the wall behind the counter. And I said, Jack, has anybody climbed any of that in there? He went, no, not yet. So the only climb on that face was the Ascent Ridge, which is very well known at that time. This had been climbed by an expedition that took them 6 weeks. And our objective was to come back one day and climb this one in Alpine style in just 1 week. In 1979, I finally got this bug out of my system. I had to climb the north face of the Eiger in winter. And eventually we did it with my friend Chris Hoyland. Over 4 days we climbed that famous face. And we had a ball. I think probably the most enjoyable climb I've ever done was the north face of the Eiger. People make such a fuss about it. It's a very good route, but it's not that bad. Jack called me in 1980. He said, what are you doing this summer? I said, I haven't really got a plan. He said, well, why don't you come back to Alaska with me and we'll do that thing on McKinley that we saw. So I drew a line on a picture and I sent it to him and said, like that? He said, yeah, something like that. We called ourselves the Too Loose Climbing Expedition. That was really how we were, just the two of us. Not a lot of equipment, not a lot of food. Speed and lack of money were the motivating factors. And to get to our climb, we have to go up through the Valley of Death. It's actually called that. It's the northeast fork of the Kehiltner Glacier. And the reason it's called the Valley of Death is that all this crap falls down on a regular basis while you're travelling underneath it. It's an avalanche trap. Lucky turn though, I met 2 now close friends, Mike Helms and Bob Candycoat. They were going to go do the Ascent Ridge and they were walking up the Valley of Death with us. And we made friends like you do. I mean, we've got a big job ahead of us and they were good talkers, these guys, good fun. We made a fatal error with our campsite, which was something that caused us to bond. We thought that this thing here falling down regularly was fine, it was far enough away. But as you can see, we were wrong. One morning I was sitting in the tent with Jack and I looked at Bob's face and I heard this noise and I saw the blood drain from his head as he turned around and ran, barefooted through the glacier as fast as he could to get away from my tent. And we just zipped it up and waited in blocks of ice, big as cars, actually resting on the canvas of the tent. The next day it was too windy, we made igloos to sleep in. Igloos are great. And we made a really big one for Jack and I so we could put the tent inside it. And there's a picture of Jack, writing his last will and testament before we start up the southwest face. I have all of Jack's journals and I've used them in the book. He's very honest and it helped me enormously to piece together what really happened because he wasn't very talkative with me. He would never sort of say, oh gee, I'm really worried about this, keep it to himself. He always looks so happy. I thought he must be really brave or something. So on the 6th of June, the dates are important, we started up the southwest face. And on the first day we climbed about 1,800 feet, which is not bad, it's not great, but it's not bad. There's a little red line, you can see a whole day taken just to do that little bit of climbing. That night we couldn't find anywhere to put a tent, so we sat out in the open and thank God it wasn't windy. Put all our clothes on and brewed tea all night. The night in Alaska is a bit weird, the sun doesn't really set, it just sort of goes behind McKinley and then comes up again. So you can get going when you get cold. Disappointingly, the climbing was much, much harder than we'd anticipated. We only had one photograph because they were expensive, and taken from one perspective, you don't really get the angle of the face very well. So we didn't get far the next 2 days, and we decided that we would camp under this boulder and just take a rest because Jack's feet were bleeding. He didn't admit to me, but he had frostbite the winter before, and he was doing all sorts of funny things with his boots to stop it from, to improve the circulation to his toes. And he got blisters and so on. So we decided to stay under this amazing place. It's like being on the moon, totally safe in Apollo 13 or Apollo 11. It felt like that, nothing can fall on us. It's very comfortable. We can wander around. It's just a little bit of flat stuff under there. But the best campsite in the world. But the terrible thing is you do have to leave it. Meanwhile, our friends Bob and Mike are doing well on the Cassin Ridge. They're running sort of parallel with us up their route. We're all heading for the same summit, but by different routes. Here I am, happy as a clam in Apollo 11, doing product placement advertisements. Happy young man. We left the boulder on the 10th, so we've been on the face for 4 days now. We had about 7 days' food, stretchable to 10, we thought. So it was important that we got off as quickly as we could. We had a very long day the next day, zigging and zagging and trying to avoid some very difficult sections. I nearly killed us both by almost falling out of an overhanging crank. And Jack climbed this amazing pitch that he had to take most of his clothes off to do. Not stripped down, just taking all the heavy clothes off and his helmet and everything like that. The most remarkable piece of rock climbing. But we're still not out of the woods, and it's getting very worrying now because we've been up there for 6 days and food's running low and we're still in amongst the sea of rocks. Next day we do get out, and you can see me here, and that's the big serac in the middle of the face. So we're going to head around that and up onto the middle, and we should be home free now because in front of us the rest of the climb is very, very easy. But we're there, so it's just snow really to the summit, a bit of ice maybe. Can't be that hard. We should be able to do that in a day. But unfortunately, I was getting sick. I know now that I had a condition called cerebral edema. What happens is the body reacts badly to the lack of oxygen sometimes. Sometimes you get pulmonary edema where your lungs fill with liquid. Sometimes you get cerebral edema, and what happens is brain cells swell up trying to increase their surface area. And they do that by increasing liquid in the brain, which is a problem because you have a skull. And the skull won't allow the brain to expand, so you get pressure and it shuts down the functions one by one, and you usually die. I met a surgeon who specialises in this recently, and he said, having read your book, I'm amazed that you ever got to write it, because anybody who has those symptoms who continues to ascend always dies in his experience. Not so happy now. We're in a very serious state. I can not climb well. We're out of food, and we've got about 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet of climbing to go, and it's painfully slow. Sometimes I feel better, sometimes I don't. The effects are getting stronger and stronger, and we don't understand what's wrong with me. I look all right in this picture. Amazing views. As we get towards the Cassin Ridge, Alaska opens up because we can see what's on the other side. And it's the most amazing place. Tarketon is somewhere down there. This is Mount Huntington. We got to the Cassin Ridge and I sat down to take some pictures, and when I tried to get up I fell over. I'd lost my balance completely. The pressure in my head has affected my inner ear and I can't stand. We spent 3 days there. Jack tried to drag me over the summit, me crawling and him pulling, and I couldn't do it. The idea was if we get over the summit we could get down the other side very easily because the back half of the mountain is pretty gentle. And he was faced with the most awful dilemma of his life. Does he stay with me and die with me, because certainly I will, or does he leave me there in the hope of getting over the summit and finding someone to help? He decided on the latter, but he never actually got to do it. He was packed and ready to go, struck by indecision. This is what we were trying to do. We were trying to get down that side. But fate took a hand. Mike Helms and Bob Candico. Mike had found some gasoline on the way up the Cassin Ridge. People leave dumps of stuff if they can't use it, and he found some gas, and this was one of the life-saving things as it turned out, because We could always melt snow, we could have liquids. You can not eat apparently for about 12 days, but if you have liquid in you could get along. And they caught up with us. Just as Jack was about to leave me, Bob Candico turned up, and we have this reunion at 19,500 feet. There's a council of war, what to do with me, and Bob volunteered to stay with me, which is quite the bravest and most selfless thing that anybody could do. I mean, we're at very high altitude. At 19,000 feet in Alaska is not like 19,000 feet in the Himalayas. You know, you're close to the Arctic Circle up there. And we waited for a couple of days, thinking that maybe someone would come and rescue us, and we realised that it wasn't going to happen. The only way we were going to survive would be to climb down. We climbed down the Cassin Ridge. My God, that's the hardest route on the biggest mountain in Alaska, apart from the one that Jack and I had just climbed. We're going to climb down. That climbing down is difficult. So what he would do is that he would tie me to the end of the rope, let me slide down on my butt till we got to the end of 50 metres, then I'd anchor myself, and he would climb down again. And we did that for about 2,000 feet, and I started to feel almost immediately a little bit better. Balance started to come back. But now very weak, because this is foodless day 7, maybe 6 for Bob. And you know, the hunger cravings were awful. He was giving me, I proudly said once, I've never taken a recreational drug in my life apart from red wine. And Bob Candico pointed out, that's not quite true. Remember those pills I was giving you as we were going down the Cassin Ridge? I said, yeah, they were, you know, what was it, glucose or something? He said, no, it was speed, man. So he'd give me 2, and he would take 1, and we were good for about 5 hours. But then you had to make sure you had the tent up, because when it wore off, you were just gone. You know, you'd be found crawling around on our hands and knees trying to put the tent up. We had a big storm, and at C, or D rather, I really thought that the game was up. I couldn't see that we were going to survive, we were going to die. We just kept going, but there was just no way that I could see us getting out of this. And I was rappelling. And I tied a knot in the end of the rope because I was so weak that I thought I might be stupid enough to actually have something off the end of the rope. And as I looked up at Bob, he's shouting and pointing, and he's pointing, and I can't, what are you pointing at? And I looked down, and it was a really convincing illusion. You know, there was a tent with 4 guys looking up at me. And this is why we survived. The freaks. I'm still good friends with Bob Candico, and we both caught up with Mike Pantelick, who was one of these guys. They were making a very incompetent ascent of the Cassin Ridge, but they had this huge, heavy tent and some freeze-dried food, and we were able to stay the night with them and realised, okay, now we've got a chance. We can actually, with some company, with some more rope, we can get off this thing. So we continued down with them until we got to a flat area at 14,000 feet, and Bob ran away, and I thought he was really lost it now. He untied from the rope and just ran away. I realised that he was chasing these guys. These Japanese guys had a radio, and his main motivation was to tell the park where we were and get his park to tell his mother and father that he wasn't dead, because he feared that we might have been listed as missing already, and this awful feeling that his parents would be in great anguish. He was pleased as punch. He organised lunch for me. They said, you know, would you like to be rescued? And I said, no. Is that okay, Simon? I said, yeah, no, we're okay now. We'll get off this thing by ourselves, thanks. He said, well, lunch is on the way, and this helicopter was on its way to pick up a frostbite victim, and as they passed over us, they threw duffel bags of food and fuel and everything that we needed to survive. So now we've really done it. The Japanese have left fixed ropes on the last little bit of climbing down to the Japanese couloir, which is a 3,000-foot rappel, and we're back on the glacier, right where we started almost a month beforehand. We're foodless again on day 22. And I thought that Bob had found some food. What he's actually doing is using the stove to melt the ice in his ski shoes, which we'd left our skis there, so we had those back. And we thought, all we've got to do now is just ski for maybe 1 day or 2 days. How hard could that be to get back to the base camp, and we can fly out? So we've made the most ridiculous traverse of Mount McKinley. We've climbed the southwest face by its first ascent, and we've made the first ever descent of the second hardest route on the mountain. So I was beginning to feel pretty proud of myself. I wasn't so sick. And then I skied into a crevasse. Bob was in front of me in a whiteout, And I couldn't really see where I was going. I was just following the rope. The rope's like a snake in the snow. It moves, and then you move, and you wait for it to move again. Suddenly the rope went really tight, pulled me off my feet, dragged me through the snow, like, a huge amount of force, and I tumbled over a cliff and fell 120 feet into a crevasse and knocked myself out. And I came to hanging upside down with 2 broken skis, big smash on the head, I'd broken my arm and wrist. I didn't know where I was. I knew I was a climber, I knew I was in a crevasse. It was as much as obvious, but I couldn't think of anybody's names or anything like that. Luckily, there was a team of Lutheran brothers, the Twin Cities Health Club expedition. They were right nearby, and they came and pulled me out. And I met the guy that pulled me out in 2014 on the way to Banff. His name's Steve Friddle. He walked up to me in a presentation and said, "You owe me a beer." So I'm really sorry state now. So I relent. I allow myself to be rescued, and the 2 Swiss guys come up with a litter and put me in it and tie me down. And through the night, we skied the 20 kilometres or so back to the base camp. Ranger Dave Buchanan came and visited me recently. That's Dave. He rounded me up with his posse. He's got his band. I've got a broken arm. I've got a big smack on the head, as you can see. But I'm happy. I'm going to live. They put me in a tent all by myself because I smelt so bad that no one would go with me. And they gave me a bar of chocolate and a beer. And I drank the beer and I passed out. And I woke up in the morning with this brown goo in my hand. And I was really pleased when I realised it was just chocolate. There's Frances Randall, the radio operator. She's a musician and has a little bit of a drinking problem. She's gone now, but brave woman, gave me a kiss. This is my pilot, Doug Geating, the taxi driver for a lunatic, and not the happy escape like 1978. They put me in the back of the Cessna like a sack of potatoes. I can't walk, and it was a sad way to leave the mountains for me. We drove all the way back to Anchorage without stopping in Tahkeetna with the windows open. As Doug said, I smelt worse than his horse's ass. When I got to hospital, they put me in a ward with Jack Roberts. I didn't know where he was. I hadn't seen him for nearly 2 weeks. Those are his feet, not mine. And we were reunited. The last bivouac of the Toulouse expedition was in a hospital room in Providence Hospital in Anchorage, and I spent a month there. And had a long time to think about what had happened. The relationship between Jack and I had been severely strained. We were great friends, but what had nearly happened, it was just hard to rationalise. And I realised that I probably didn't have any climbing ambitions anymore. I couldn't actually see climbing anything bigger than that and getting away with it. And if you weren't going to try and double the odds each time, then there was no point. For me, that's why I went in the mountains. So I quit. I saw Jack alive in 1981 in London for a while. He was trying to persuade me to go back into Himalayas or something like that, and I was just having none of it. I thought that if Jack continued in that way, that he was bound to die. And I convinced myself over 3 decades after I lost track of him. Anyway, I moved to Australia. This is my house, overlooking the swamp. I took up cave diving as an alternate to climbing. It's got to get my kick somehow. I discovered the biggest cave in New South Wales by diving underwater. And that got too silly. I was afraid that somebody else was going to get killed because I encouraged a lot of people to take it up, and I had these young university students that were learning to dive. I thought, I'm leading them astray here. You've either got it in your head or you haven't. And cave diving is a very particular skill. So I took up offshore yacht racing. This is the Sydney Hobart in 1984. We didn't finish the race for an obvious reason. We managed to pull the backstay off the boat. It was extremely rough, and we were lucky not to sink that boat. And I moved to Australia, where I like big buildings. And to my total shock, I have trouble with this, so excuse me if I choke on it, but I thought that Jack was surely dead. And I was enjoying my life. And suddenly I got an email from a friend. He said, "Hey man, you should look at this website." And I discovered that Jack had been alive up until 2 weeks before. He'd just been killed in a climbing accident. taken about a year before he died. And I'm going to give him the last word. Sorry, this is my friends. Bob, who saved my life, Mike Helms, the guy on the end of the table. We're in Olympia, having a few beers in Seattle area. And I went back in 2012, 2013 to meet those guys, and we went back to the scene of the crime. We hired a plane that had some tourists in the back of it too. You can do these scenic flights. And we got onto one of those and just hijacked it and said, here's some extra money, I want to go here, and then I want to go there. And we flew as close as we possibly could to Denali and scared the crap out of the people in the back, I think. And we're getting closer and closer and closer. And we landed on the west fork of the Ruth Glacier. The lady in the middle in the blue is Pam Roberts. She brought some of Jack's ashes with her. And I think this is the last slide, and Jack has the best comment. Thank you.
A couple minutes for Q&A if anyone wants to start off.
From one Simon to another, great talk. When you're travelling up a mountain, you already got ration food. At what point do you decide, let's ration this a little bit more? Like with, for example, the Scotch, did that last the whole trip?
We left the Scotch in base camp very sensibly. You look at it day by day and you think, well, if I stop eating too early, I'm just going to slow myself down. You're going to get very weak at some point. And so we decided that we would eat fairly normally until we got to the summit and then just deal with it. We thought we could get down in a couple of days. It took us 4 days to get down from Mount Huntington. And, we were pretty skinny when we got back to Turkey, and I can tell you we shivered ourselves thin. But you can actually do it. Once you've got liquid, you can put up with being hungry for quite a long time.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Anybody? I have a question. So what are you doing now? What's your next rush?
My office is, okay. What am I doing now? I just race boats now. Well, offshore yacht racing is my thrill. It's quite exciting going over the horizon when you're all on your own, particularly the South China Sea. We got buzzed by 2 fighter planes from China the last time I went to the Philippines. It was quite interesting. They used us for target practice. Didn't actually fire us or anything, just zoom. So that's my kick at the moment.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You are a businessman right now. So how your previous experience, expeditions and so on, did it contribute to your business perspective right now? Did it change your point of view, or did you make decisions based on your previous experience? How did that contribute to your business life right now?
It's certainly part of my DNA. All of that stuff that I did is just a symptom of who you are. Very determined, that helps in business, and prepared to take risks, which is, we try and take less stupid risks than bad ones. I've been bitten a few times, but mostly we make more good decisions than bad decisions. I don't think you can really do much in business if you're owning it, if you're not prepared to take risks.
You have a question right here? No?
Hi, thanks very much for the talk. One of the questions I have is in relation to the journals that you were keeping. I'm just interested that, the person that you are when you're climbing and the stress that you're under, the things that you write. When you come back down again, you read that. Is that like reading what someone else might have written? I'm just interested in that, how you look back at that.
I was pretty boring as a journal writer. Jack was the one that actually would pour his heart out and would talk about the women that he wanted to see and how he felt about nearly dying and how he felt about his relationship with me, and he'd write it all down. He was very industrious that way. I didn't write much. I just, had we climbed that far, I was writing the route description and everything else, so my stuff wasn't very interesting. I never read any of it, and he wasn't very honest with me while we were on the phone, not in a bad way, just shitting himself, he didn't say a word. You just don't open subjects like that. You know, you can't get down, and there are no options. There's just no point in discussing how bad it is or what might go wrong. You know, you just keep going. So Jack's in the book. I use a lot of his words. He actually wrote, probably a quarter of the Denali climb just straight from his journals. And something about Americans, they all keep journals. You know, Bob Candico had another really candid journal. That I got to use as well. So the story becomes a series of maybe 3 or 4 voices speaking to the reader. It worked out very well.
Okay, thank you very much. Where can we get your book? I guess.
Amazon, certainly. The paperbacks just came out in the UK. If you like, contact me. I've got plenty of them in Hong Kong if you want one. Probably the quickest way to do it, actually. I can even sign it for you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Simon.